Today we're going to look at how we turn our fish tank animation into a fish tank game. Now, I'm starting from the end of lesson 1, where by now we should have a simple animation. So if I click the go button, I've got an animation that's moving, I've got some sound effects in the background, and I've got my sprites moving around. I'm just going to stop this. Now, the first step we need to do is add another sprite. Now, there's a reason why you were told not to add the shark, because at this point we're going to add the shark sprite. So we're going to go down to where it says add sprite, click choose a sprite, and it gives you all the sprites that we've looked at before. If I click under animals, it should help me find what I'm looking for. Scroll down and here's my shark, and it adds my shark sprite. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to add some code to allow it to move around using the keyboards. Now you've done something in the lesson already similar to this, and so this is just a repeat of that. I'm just going to pause for a second and create the code. So after a few seconds of grabbing some blocks from the events and motion sections of Scratch, I've managed to get my code ready for my shark to move around. So now if I push the up arrow, it will move in the direction it's facing. If I push the down arrow, it moves in the opposite direction to the direction it's facing. And then after I'm moving the left and right arrows, it will start to rotate. Now this will give me the ability to move an object around the screen, which is the starting point of our game. The next step is to see what happens when the shark touches the fish. Now this is something you've discussed in the lesson already. When the shark touches the fish, I want the fish to vanish. So this is adding in an instruction to the code of the fish. You can add it on the shark, but it's far more complicated. So I'm going to come over to the yellow fish, and I'm just going to do this on one fish to start with. If it works on one fish or one sprite, then I can copy this across to all the other fish. Now I'm just going to pause for a second while I pull the code together. Now here you can see I've grabbed the pieces of code I need, and now I'm just going to assemble them. So when the green flag clicked, I want this piece of code to start running. It needs to run forever because it needs to keep checking if this is actually working. If touching mouse pointer, don't want that. I want if touching shark, and my shark is called shark2, and I want it to hide. So what this is saying is if the shark touches the yellowfish, then the yellowfish will hide, which is exactly what was happening in the example game. The reason why it needs to be in a forever loop is because this is a question that's being asked. Am I touching the shark? Now, if you don't have it in a forever loop, it only asks the question once, and after the question is finished being asked, it doesn't ask it again. And because I want it to happen at various points within the game, I need to keep that if statement running. So I'm constantly checking if it's working. If I now run the game, we can see that there's a yellow line around the outside which shows it's an active script, and you can see that the fish has vanished. Now, there's a small problem here. It's vanished, but in the original game, it did something else. It came back. And so we have to tell the yellowfish, in this case, to reappear after a certain amount of time. So we do this by grabbing, I'm just going to click stop. We do this by grabbing a wait block from control, and then we go back to Luke's and we get a show block. So after a certain amount of time, and this number we can change it here by making it 3 seconds, or you could always use an operator block to pick a random number to make it a bit more random. For now, we're going to keep it simple. So now, when I start off the game, the fish should appear and then disappear when the shark touches it. It finishes, so 1, 2, 3. There you go, reappears. 1, 2, 3, and it reappears. Now there is something interesting about this that we do have to remember to add in to the code. So as we're running right now, if I click the green flag to start the game, the yellowfish is nowhere on screen. Now when I push the green flag, the yellowfish doesn't reappear. And this is because we haven't told it to reappear at the beginning of the game. This is coming back to that initialization idea of this. So this initializes the sprite, tells you where it is, what direction it's pointing in. So we actually need to add an extra block here. Now you can add it in a couple of different places. You could add it here as part of the sensing script for it to vanish, or you could add it up here as part of the initialization. What you need to do is make sure the program is telling the yellow fish to appear at the start of the game, because otherwise it can't touch the shark to vanish again because it's already invisible. I'm going to put it here for now in the initialization, but you can put it in this block as well. You can hit stop and start, and the yellow fish appears, and it's going to move around. Hopefully it's going to touch the blue shark. I can move the blue shark to try and catch the fish, and then it vanishes, and then 1, 2, 3, and the other fish then vanishes. So what I'm going to do now is pause for a moment, add this script to all the other sprites, and then show you it working. We can do this quite quickly just by copying it across by clicking and dragging. One of the advantages of doing this on the fish and not the shark. Come back in a second. So now I've added the script to, or code to each of the sprites. If I click stop and start, now I should be able to go around and click them all up, and after 3 seconds they will reappear. So my game is nearly there. Now the last part of the game I need to add is a score, because at the moment I don't know how well I'm doing. So in order to add a score, I need to add a variable. Now what we do with adding a variable, I'm going to stop for a moment. In order to add a variable, we go down to variables and we click make a variable. When you're making a variable, you have to give it a name. It's really important, just like when we're looking at our sprites, that we name things correctly. So I'm just going to call this score because that is what it is. And genuinely, you're not always going to pick for all sprites, okay? And then we're going to click OK. When we add a score, we get some new information, okay? Now, the question you need to think about is, when do we want 1 to be added to the score? What's causing the score to go up by 1? Now, if you think this through, you'll realize the moment that the shark touches one of the other fish, the fish vanishes. That's the point when we want the score to be added. So we're just adding in 1 extra instruction to an existing set of blocks. So if I go back to our yellow fish and scroll down here, I want to change the score by a certain amount and change it by 1, which means add 1. If you wanted to go down by 1, it would be -1 or -2. So I'm going to drag this block in here and put it in here. So once it's hid, it changes the score, waits, and then shows again. So now if I run this again, only the yellow fish should work for this. But now, yellow fish, there you go. I'm getting scores of fish. Yellow fish goes up to 3, which is excellent. And then we get another one there. So the score is working. The only thing we have to think about is when I click stop and start, what happens to the score? It's still 5. So again, this comes back to making sure we initialize the program properly, and somewhere within the program, probably on the backdrop where the sound is, because the score is to do with the whole program, it's not about one sprite, you need to make sure when the program is started, we have to set the score to 0. So we can put it all in here quite happily. When green flag is clicked, we set the score to 0, and then we start playing the bubble sound. This could be within this script, or if you prefer, you can actually have this as a little separate script as well, if it helps to make sure things are more sort of spread out. This is the sound sprite, this is the bit to do with score. So now if I click go, the score resets. The only fish though, of course, is going to give me points to still the yellow fish, and that's working brilliantly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause for a moment. I'm going to add in the block so all the fish are giving a score. I'm going to give it one final test. So now I've done that, it should be ready to go. When I hit the green flag, all of the fish should make sure they appear on screen, and then the score should reset and all of them should be adding to the score. I've also changed the amount of time they vanish for, so they shouldn't all appear at the same time. So let's click go, see what happens. So that's giving me a point, that's giving me a point, excellent. And they're all giving me points now, which is great, so it's successfully working. And we've got now the fact that the fish are reappearing at slightly different times to make the game a little bit more challenging. Now at this point, you might be quite happy with the game and you could stop there, but there are other things you can constantly add to the game. So something I'm going to quickly show you is how to add a timer, because ideally you want to set yourself a challenge to try and get the most points in a set amount of time. And after that, there are more challenges that you could do, which your teacher will explain to you. But this is the last thing I'm going to show you in this video, is how to add a timer. And again, to do this, you've got to think really carefully about, what does a timer do? What is the steps it is actually working through? What's the algorithm it's following? The first thing we need to do is actually make a timer variable, because we need to keep track of a number. And then I'm going to click OK. Now I'm going to place the timer. I can move this around, so I'm going to put the timer over here. And I'm going to place the timer code on the backdrop, because that's where I think it's the most sensible to put it. So I've switched to this point. I'm going to drag some blocks off, and then we're going to talk about how we snap them together. Now here I've grabbed out the blocks that I need to create my timer. Now it's important to think about the algorithm, as I said. So what we're going to be doing here is setting the timer to a number, for example 30 seconds. Then once every second we want to subtract 1 from the variable. And we need it to stop when you get to 0. Okay? So I'm going to drag on a little operator block, which is going to be saying, so I want to repeat doing this until the timer is less than 1, i.e. 0. I want this to keep happening. So it starts when the green flag is clicked. We are going to change the timer by 1 every second. And at the beginning, of course, we need to set this timer to a number. I'm going to do this as an example for 10, but you probably will set it to a higher number to make the game actually achievable, so you can get a score. So in order just to test this block, I'm just going to double click on it once. And so now I've got my timer, and it's counting up because I've made a mistake. Now, can anyone see what the mistake is? Those eagle-eyed people will have spotted that instead of minusing 1, I've changed the timer by a +1. So here we go, -1. And then if you just click it again, it goes to 10, 9, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then at 0, it will stop, because that's what I've told it to do. If I didn't have this repeat until, it would have gone to -1, -2, -3. Okay. So now if I run everything together, I'm going to keep it at 10 seconds just so we can see how it works. I'm going to click the green flag to make it go. So here it is. I'm going to move around, 6, 4, very quickly. Score 6, and there you go. So the time has gone to 0. Now the only other thing to do is, at the point when the timer stops, the game should end, shouldn't it? You don't want to be able to score any more points. So there's one last block we can add to this right at the bottom, and this is under control, where we've got this button called stop all. Now this is a block I would be wary about using, because it does fundamentally kill the game. It's like hitting this red button. So you can stop a number of things, but if you click stop all, what will happen is everything will stop. So the sound will stop, and also all the movements. And that's a really good way of making the game end. So we're going to just try that. I'm going to make this 5 seconds just so it's nice and quick to see. I'm going to stop and start. And you can see 3, 2, 1. There you go, and the game stops. So I think that's enough for now for me explaining how to create your fish tank game from your animation. There are plenty of other things you can do to extend your work. You could look at perhaps adding a game over screen, maybe a start screen. You could think about how you could make it so the shark only sensed with its mouth, and perhaps even make it harder as time passes. These are all great ideas to expand your game and to make the game more challenging. Hopefully this was useful, and I hope you make some really interesting games.